Good afternoon. How are you? Well, it's a brisk day out here. It's about 61. The humidity's 54. And the wind is at 7 miles an hour. Not obvious to me, but that continues to be the case. The day started with a frost on the ground and an early morning drive to court. But the court appearance worked well on behalf of our client. Myself and another member of the firm made a presentation, and it was one of those examples in which it's a criminal case, the prosecution and the defense, us, were able to persuade each other of what was a possible settlement. So that was the fun part of the day. You're apprehensive beforehand because you put yourself in the place of the client, and that makes a difference for how you handle the case. And we could use more of that among the public who speak to the issues of the day, but not with the responsibility it happens, in my experience, in good litigation. There's plenty of bad litigation too. So why do I sound a little cheerier today? Well, we're getting close to the end of this excruciating election year, but I found it encouraging that Harris regained the lead nationally, but we don't know about the Electoral College yet. The poll, if you're looking it up, is the ABC News poll, the Ipsos poll, and it's out today, so it's about as recent as you can expect. The Electoral College is going to be about those states that, frankly, have a disproportionate influence on what happens in the election based on their size. But putting that aside, those are the rules of the game, and the game has very significant repercussions. So we're going to be looking at Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin. Now there's another thing to keep in mind, and that is that the polls taken at this point, often the difference between, say, the poll in this period of time is 5.1 points. So that's a decent margin to be off by. So Kamala in today's poll nationally is at 51, and Trump is at 47. And a trusted former New York Times, Wall Street Journal journalist, reporter, author says he's absolutely confident that Kamala is going to win. And I figure if we do everything we can, there's this X factor that favors us. In fact, today I tested out this theory in a non-scientific statistical sample of 2 people. After we were in court this morning, my partner and I, we had coffee together and discussed the case. And the people waiting on us were this is probably the first presidential race they've voted in. They were both young. And they were reticent to tell me how they voted. I didn't grill them, but conversationally we talked a little bit about it. And it was interesting. They're both persons of color. And when I said what my position was, and I tapped my hand and said to the Republicans, Trump and company, color matters. But to Democrats, we have an ally because we care about people's individual rights and liberties. And we have the legislation and the content, at least in present times, to be the party of the faithful that care about these things. Then they immediately told me that they'd already voted, and they had voted for Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. So you see, now I don't know how they're sampling young voters, but the conversation I had was spread over the time we were there, about 40 minutes or so, because they'd come to the table occasionally and we'd have little bits and pieces of conversation. So how do you get that in a sample? I don't know, but we're going to find out. Now the ABC poll that's out has some really interesting comparisons. For example, they inquired in the sample about the health of the candidates. How do they compare? And Kamala got 58, and Trump got 25. It's a difference of 29 points. So if that's the case, what are we talking about here? In terms of honesty, it shouldn't surprise us, there was a spread of 43 to 28. That's 15 points. Mental sharpness, 49 to 38. That's a difference of 11. So the kinds of issues about who the person is, the character, Trump does terrible in those terms. But again, we're talking about a poll, talking about a spread of 5 that's possible, and we don't have, although some of the best polling may be going on, we don't have a handle on what's going to happen in the battleground states. So there's that. So what do we expect to be confronting in the days ahead? Well, referring as recently as the Madison Square Garden get-together yesterday, it's clear that what we have is they're spending a lot of dollars for deception. It's very transactional, very quid pro quo. It's close to gratuities and even bribery. And if somebody investigates it, and they may, we'll find out if that's the possibility. But we heard how the oil industry was going to get a special consideration if they contributed so much to Trump's campaign. We have people like the people on the board of directors of different places, the corporate interests like Jeff Bezos at the Washington Post, and how that's distorting, well, the role and the function and the mandate of the Washington Post, prompting those on the editorial board to walk away from it, for reporters to criticize it and so forth. And then, when you put somebody out there and you know it's going to be covered, and they put a comic out there to say Puerto Rico was an island of garbage, a couple of things go on there. We know that Trump didn't think very much of Puerto Rico. We have that image in our mind of him throwing paper towels to the people in the terrible act of nature that could have destroyed any other people. And instead of being there, a source of help and caring and so forth, it's almost he made a mockery of it. So it's hard to separate that faux pas, if you will, when Puerto Rico was under siege by that weather disaster, from what he's doing now. Now, Kamala Harris said of Trump that he fans the fuel of hate. He does. Who wants to go on like this, in which day by day there are different targets for the hate, until people are so nervous that they wonder when and if they'll be next? And there are famous quotes from the Hitler period about how when people didn't stand up to Hitler, what they were doing was they were taking away the allies for themselves and others down the road. We are not in that situation. We're fighting like mad. We're scoring points. And I think we can win this. Now, for example, with the Puerto Rican vote, they may say, what are they going to do? They can't vote in the presidential election if they're in Puerto Rico. No. But there are people from Puerto Rico across the United States, and there's a whole contingent of them west and north of Philadelphia and Pennsylvania, one of those battleground states. And, Trump did the same thing in Detroit in a way. He attacked Detroit and said if we're not careful, the whole world will be like Detroit. Does he think that's going to help him in Michigan? Maybe he does. And maybe this is only to get enough of a base so that he can have an argument, public argument, that the election was fixed. And he had all these other groups and so forth supporting him. But again, the answer to that in part is that the commander-in-chief, and this time, is Biden. And I think that the attempts that might be made can be dealt with him in that role. But we've also seen how lawyers from Kamala's campaign, sounds like music, doesn't it? How people from Kamala's campaign are going into court and fighting these battles and winning them. And so the courts on some level aren't all owned by Trump and his corrupt minion. And so as a result, we are fighting our way to as fair a standoff as we can have. And I always like to look at the drift in the polls to see what the vector of change is. But you have to admit, and I do, as much as I like to see the numbers and the spread increasing on the national level, you have to realize that the target, the actual vote, as compared to the prediction within this period of time, can be off by 5 points, 5.1 points. So that's what we have to deal with. We don't have any choice, and we're not going to know any more. So what do? Keeping busy is always good when there's a bad thing going on. And those of you celebrating Halloween, the eve of All Hallows Day, which is to honor the past saints. Well, one thing is clear, Trump is not one of those saints. And if there's a way to celebrate Halloween, it's to think of him for what he is, not a saint, in fact the devil, and he's the trick. But Kamala is the treat. So this is what I got to say about things today, and I hope you're well. Holly and I got ourselves a small wagon for our pigs when we have to take them places, either to show them off or for medical attention, and it happens with them. And we just had one guy who had terrible pain, and we took him in to the doctor, and he had a 17-pound tumor inside of him that they had to remove, and we're hoping he's going to do fine. These animals are amazing. And so he came home yesterday and he seemed quite happy to be back in the field again and a little lighter. He started out 100 pounds, but 17 pounds of that was the tumor. So that's the local Republican shooting a gun, getting ready for Election Day. Sorry, it's probably not so, but we have some yahoos in my neighborhood, shall we say. So among my cathedral of trees, somewhat at a distance from where I'm walking, I say adieu until tomorrow. All the best. Bye-bye.